Hello and welcome to Tracks Through Time. I am your host and FreightWaves Deputy Editor, Brielle Jekyll, and I'm here to tell you about some of the most interesting stories throughout history in transportation and freight. And today we are covering a group of amazing Black women during World War II who single-handedly fixed the postal problem in the Army at the time. And then we also hear from a historian for the U.S. Army who gives us an inside scoop on these women and their story. But before we dive into the inspiring story of the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion, I want to address an important aspect of our discussion. As a white woman exploring a moment in Black history, it's really crucial for me to recognize and acknowledge the significance of this narrative and the voices that should be centered. While my intention is to shed light on this extraordinary chapter, I really want to emphasize the importance of amplifying the experiences and perspectives of the women of the 6888 Battalion themselves. It is a privilege to tell these stories, and I really want to acknowledge the invaluable contributions of Black historians, scholars, community members, and those in the Army themselves who have diligently researched, documented, and preserved the legacy of the 6888 Battalion. And their work really serves as the foundation for our exploration today. So let's get into it. When we think about the heroic contributions of women during World War II, we often conjure up images of Rosie the Riveter, dedicated nurses, fearless spies, but there were so many other unsung heroines who played pivotal roles, even in the face of discrimination and adversity. Today, we shine a spotlight on one such group of remarkable women called the 6888 Battalion, or the 6888th Battalion, which is commonly known as the 6888. As World War II raged on, the importance of efficient communication and mail delivery to troops stationed overseas cannot be overstated. During the war, the U.S. Army faced a logistical nightmare when it came to handling the immense volume of mail. Enter the 6888. An all-Black unit of women who were tasked with an extraordinary mission to clear a backlog of mail and ensure that millions of letters and packages reached their intended recipients. The story of the 6888 began in 1944 when the Army faced an estimated 7 million pieces of undelivered mail piled up in warehouses across Europe, leaving troops longing for news from home. Amidst the chaos and frustration, the Army made the groundbreaking decision to deploy the 6888th Battalion, an all-Black female unit, to tackle it. Led by Major Charity Adams, the 6888 was composed of over 800 enlisted African-American women. These trailblazers came from all corners of the United States, united by their determination to serve their country and their loved ones overseas. Despite facing pervasive racism and sexism both within and outside the military, these women showcased extraordinary resilience and expertise as they set out to confront the logistical nightmare before them. The women of the 6888 had to organize, sort, and deliver an unprecedented amount of mail, often working under challenging conditions. In makeshift warehouses and cramped spaces, they sorted through mountains of letters, packages, and parcels, carefully ensuring that each item reached the correct soldier. Their impact extended far beyond the delivery of mail. Their presence challenged prevailing stereotypes and shattered racial gender barriers. The women of the 6888 proved beyond a doubt that they were capable of carrying out vital military options with efficiency, skill, and unwavering determination. Now, If you're just joining us, we are discussing the 6th Eighth Battalion during World War II, who are responsible for the delivery of mail to soldiers throughout Europe. And now we're going to hear from Kevin Hemel, whose work as a historian has really helped bring this group of women's story to light. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Tracks Through Time. I am here with Kevin Hemel, who is a contract historian for the U.S. Army. Yes, that's right, a contract historian for the U.S. Army. And he's also a historian for Steve Ambrose Historical Tours and the author of numerous books related to and articles related to World War II. And also a relatively recent role that we're going to keep a secret for now and we will talk about later. Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Brielle. Thanks for having me on the show. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So I'm really excited. I've given the audience a little bit of an intro on our story here, but you are really an expert in the 6th Battalion. And I think it's such an interesting story because it's relatively unknown in, World War II history. It's not something that we really, extensively covered in movies, television, articles, things like that. So I was really, really excited to be able to talk to you and learn about what you know about these amazing women. But first, I want to start off and really kind of get down to what were the circumstances that really led to the 6th Postal Battalion, between their gender, their race, and their job, why was that needed?
Sure. Well, in times of war, necessity makes brilliant people out of everyone. And what was happening as the war is going on and being fought across Europe, a lot of soldiers, their families back home are mailing them letters and packages. And if the soldiers were wounded or transferred to another unit or some odd circumstance that they're not where they're supposed to be, the mail would kind of bounce back to England where it was going to get figured out and then resent. Well, a step got lost in all of that. There's a major war going on in Europe. This is one of the things that slips through the cracks. And you've got this buildup of mail in Birmingham, England. I think it's at least 3 warehouses full. And how are we going to get this disseminated? We got every able-bodied male, has got to be on the front fighting. They're taking heavy casualties. That's the priority. And so you've got all these African-American women in the United States who've signed up to serve, and they're doing different jobs all over the country in the continental United States. And through some lobbying through Black leaders, they say, okay, here's a task that we can give these women to do. This is an important task. It needs to get done. But a lot of people don't believe that Black women can do this job. This is something that's going to take brains. You need a white person, and we're not even sure a woman is up to this. They're really facing all kinds of sexism and racism. So they put together a battalion under Major Charity Adams, and this is about 850 women. They send them overseas across the Atlantic Ocean. They set up shop in Birmingham, England, and they're only given 6 months to get all these warehouses of mail, directed to where they should be going. They had a unique name. It was the 6th Central Postal Directory Battalion. So they're not really going out and handing out the mail to the soldiers in the front. They're getting it organized from Birmingham to get to the right locations once it departs. They don't face a lot of racism from the British. They have a lot of acceptance, but when there's clashes with American soldiers, that's when they start hearing the N-word and a lot of questions. There's some Black soldiers that show up and say, well, these women are here for us. So they're kind of getting it from every angle. And, at one point, just to give you an anecdote of kind of what they're facing, a general, and we're not sure, some people are sure who it is. I'm not confident who it is, so I'm not going to say a name. But a general comes to review the troops, and he tells Charity Adams, hey, I want to review the unit. And this battalion is made up of about 4 companies. Each company is about 100 soldiers each. And so she falls 3 companies out for inspection, and he walks down the line and he says, "Where's the other company?" And she says, "Well, they're pitching mail. This is their job." And he explodes on her and he says, "How dare you? You know, you can't follow orders. I'm going to replace you with a white lieutenant." You know, here she is a major, you know, and I don't know what happened, but he came back about a week later and apologized. So that's just like one of those kind of slights and insults. In fact, the Army sets up a black, what it was, a USO place, you know, for the women to go to, a YMCA, for them to like shoot pool or play ping pong. And Charity Adams calls the unit together and says, "I can't," and she realizes if we start going to this, we're giving into segregation. So she says, "I can't tell you not to go there, but I'm not going to go there." And not a single one of those women, put a single foot into that YMCA. So I guess it would be a WYMCA. So, you know, all these kind of slights and everything, and they're only given 6 months to do the job. And so they basically work around the clock in these cold warehouses, no heating, rats. They're wearing like layers of clothes because it's so cold, and they get the job done in 3 months. You know, so they cut the time in half. All the doubters are kind of put to shame, and they finish just as the war ends. Now, in a way, that doesn't mean anything because there's still an entire army of soldiers over there in Europe. They're not going home the next day, and they desperately want their mail. And so they ship the women to France. Again, given 6 months to get the mail caught up. They do it in 3. When it's all over, they send them to 2 big hotels in Paris, one for the officers, one for the enlisted ladies. And, you know, these women back home are 2nd and 3rd class citizens. They're nursemaids, they're seamstresses, they're cooks. And, you know, they get put up in these hotels in Paris, and suddenly they have concierge. They have a chef cooking their meals. They've got maids making their beds for them. You know, it's such a radical turnaround. And then they're sent home, the unit is dispersed, and they're completely forgotten.
I know they really, really went through so much. But what was their like specific day-to-day duties?
So the majority of it is that these warehouses are full of letters and packages, and they're obviously been delivered to the wrong place. So they are getting manifests of like soldiers in hospitals and soldiers that have been transferred, and they've got to match the letter to the soldier and get it directed to either the hospital, to the new unit, or what's called a dead letter. Reality of combat, these men have been killed in combat. And so those letters have to be returned home. And so that's the majority of it. A lot of the women, they were assigned, they had different departments. One group was taking packages that were all, you know, had been broken into by rats, and, you know, opening them up, making sure the contents was secure, wrapping them back up again, and making sure they got to the soldiers. This is a whole battalion of 800 women. So you also, and they're self-sustaining, okay? So they've got their own motor pool with their own drivers, you know, and these are all black women. These are no white soldiers supervising anything, you know. They had a headquarters department, but the majority of it is around the clock working of emptying these warehouses of these letters and packages and getting them to where they need to go on that first leg of that journey.
It's crazy to think how important their job was, because, I mean, but you wouldn't necessarily think that was such an important role to have a battalion specific for that. But you could see what happened during COVID, and even, you know, the year or two after. The mail just went absolutely haywire. I mean, it was a disaster for a long time. So I can't even imagine what that must be like during wartime, overseas, and, you know, not with the technology that we have today, you know. So I can really see how important.
Imagine if during COVID, everybody's internet went down. You know, that's kind of the equivalent. In fact, the motto for the battalion was no mail, low morale. You know, people who don't get their mail are going to have low morale. And, you know, it's one of those elements that if you're just studying combat and stuff, you don't think of. but there's all these units within the military that make the soldier's life tolerable, and manageable. I mean, you've got graves registration guides getting the dead bodies off the battlefield and burying them so soldiers don't get disease as they head into battle. The military really does think of all these external elements to make, combat more survivable, to keep the morale up. And these women were part of that.
So I do know these women received or are receiving the Congressional Gold Medal from President Biden, but there's also some kind of exciting news that's coming out where they're going to get some more recognition kind of on a bigger screen. Actually, the small screen, I would say, because it's Netflix. But yes, Tyler Perry and Kerry Washington are working on a movie about these amazing women, and you were help them out.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually very exciting. So just to give you a little bit of background, I wrote about these ladies first in 2009. And then in 2000, I guess it was 18, I found out that where I used to work at Fort Leavenworth, they were building a monument to the 6888. And somebody called me and said, hey, here's the phone number for the group building the monument. You need to connect with them, because at that point, I had interviewed 3 of the ladies, but I had moved on and was doing other things. So I call this gentleman, Carlton Philpott, and he goes, oh, my God, I'm so glad we found you, because, we've all read your article. And he said, we found 3 more women. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll do you a favor. Give me one of their names, and I'll interview the lady. I'll get it published in WWII History magazine, and it'll be a nice little tribute to go along with it. And he goes, oh, this woman, Lena King, she is a hoot. You got to interview her. So I called Lena. She lives out in Vegas. And normally when I do a lot of veteran interviews, it's usually maybe 2 interviews and maybe a third. Lena and I talked about 10 times. I had so much fun talking to her, learning her story, writing it up. She was so excited that this was, getting made. And we're getting towards the end. And so I'm telling her, Lena, I'm going to see you in November of 2018, 19. And I'll see you at Fort Leavenworth when they dedicate the statue. She said, oh, Kevin, I can't wait, because you have such a nice voice. You remind me of Lewis Henry Gates. And I'm like, ugh. She thinks I'm black. And I'm like, she's going to have a heart attack when she meets me, because she has a whole different image in her head of what I look like. And so I showed up to this thing, and I go, Lena, hi, it's me, Kevin. And this look of horror comes over her face for like a nanosecond, and she checks it and smiles and says, Kevin. And then she calls her daughter over, because it was through her daughter that I reached her. And that's what I do with a lot of vets. I usually have to call their children, because the veterans aren't on the internet, a lot of the World War II ones. So she goes, this is Kevin Hemel. And just then this woman turns around, and she's like, you're Kevin Hemel? I said, yeah. She says, well, I'm Colonel Edna Cummings, and we used your 2009 article to write the legislation to get these ladies the Congressional Gold Medal. And I'm like, there's nothing you could have told me to make me feel better. I'm so proud of that. And then I get a call from a producer out in Hollywood, Carlota Espinoza. And she says, oh my God, this article's great. We're going to make a movie out of it. We want to make a movie. And I'm like, sure, whenever. I didn't know to believe it at the time. And she calls me about 3 months later and says, okay, Michelle Obama's on board. She likes the article too. We're going to go it with Netflix. And I'm just like, oh my God. And she said, okay, you're probably going to get a phone call from Michelle in about 2 weeks. And then she calls me a week later and says, okay, Michelle is out. It's now Tyler Perry. And I'm like, fine by me. And she says, he's going to write it. He's going to direct it. He knows what he's doing. The guy does 2 movies a year. And within days, Tyler called. And, do I call you Mr. Perry? And he's like, no, you call me Tyler. And he just had all these, historical and technical questions. And I'm answering them as best I can and helping him through it, sending him images. And I'll never forget, he said that I was his new best friend. And so that was a really enjoyable experience. And then he flew me out to Hollywood for the table read. And then he flew me down to Atlanta where they're filming part of the movie. And so I got to meet Kerry Washington and some of the other actors and actresses. And it's just been an amazing experience. Yeah, so he had me down in Atlanta to film the ladies coming off their ship and marching and some battle scenes. I don't want to give a whole lot away about the movie, but I can tell you that, Tyler Perry was just in command of everything. He had a bullhorn, and the all these very pretty young ladies in World War II uniforms and everything. They march off the ship, and Kerry Washington gets up on a Jeep and gives this speech about, we're going to march. And the young ladies march, and Tyler gets on the bullhorn, and he says, "Come on, ladies, you can march better than this. You're black." And everybody kind of laughs, and he says, "Don't make me yell at you," through the bullhorn. And he goes, "Even worse, don't make Medea yell at you." And then he just launches into the Medea voice. "You better not," Everybody's laughing on stage. It was such an amazing moment. I just so impressed.
So he's directing these women as Medea almost?
Yeah. He broke into Medea voice. It was
that's amazing.
Kerry Washington, who's known for the show Scandal and several other movies and TV shows, she's going to play the battalion commander, Charity Adams, who we'd mentioned before. Oh, by the way, is half of the new name of a base or an army post now, Greg Adams. The Army's made a big push to get the names of sort of, Confederate generals out and, other people in. And so now there is a U.S. Army post called Greg Adams, a soldier's last name Greg and Charity Adams. So yes, the 6 AAA getting their due. But I actually spoke to Charity Adams' son right before I flew down to Atlanta. And I said, hey, is there anything you can tell me that I can tell that, make sure we get accurate? And he says, yes, my mother during World War II always wore yellow gloves. She wanted to look a little different. She wanted to stand out. And I said, okay. I said, is there anything else? He goes, yeah, she loved to play ping pong. I'm like, So when I got down to Atlanta and I saw Kerry Washington and she's all in her World War II uniform, I related the story about the gloves. And man, she called over a wardrobe person immediately and said, get me yellow gloves. She said, it won't probably be in the beginning of the movie, but maybe we can get them by the end of the movie. And she said, Kevin, what else you got? I said, well, Charity, I would like to play ping pong. And she was, how am I going to use that? I said, well, when you're giving a speech or something, think about ping pong. And so when she climbed up on this Jeep and gave the introductory or the welcome speech to the ladies, as she climbed down and Tyler yelled, cut, I went over to her and I said, I could tell you were thinking about ping pong. But they went off to England to film the end of the film. And at one point, my producer, as I call them, my producer gals, Carlota Espinoza and Carrie, Carrie's name just escaped me. I'm sorry, Carrie. They sent me a photograph of Kerry Washington wearing yellow gloves. And so I was like, yeah, I helped with something.
I cannot wait to see these little things. I can't wait till the film comes out and we can see all these pieces come together. I'm so excited.
The movie will be premiering in September.
Oh, that's great. That's not too long.
Yeah. And what Tyler, so the movie is really the 6 AAA story, but it's told through Lena King's story.
Oh, okay.
They were kicking around the 6 AAA idea for years, and nobody could think of what's the pull and everything. And what the producers told me, they said there are 3 sentences in your story that we realized that's the story. And it's something that when they told me this, I had no idea. To me, it was a throwaway line, but Lena, when she was in high school, was friends with a white Jewish boy, and he leaves to join the Army Air Forces, becomes a fighter pilot, and is killed in combat. And so to honor him, she joins the Army. That was her motivation. And they said, when we saw that, we said, there's the hook. A black girl and a Jewish boy having, being close. And I said, geez, when I do my veteran interviews and stuff, I'm trying to get them into combat overseas. Everything before that's just chafe. never dawned on me. So I'm really glad I kept those sentences in the story, because that was the story.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you said they've been working on it for a little bit, and we talked about the medal. Why now? Why is it now that the movie's being made, and all of a sudden we're recognizing these women?
I wish it's like, because I wrote an article in 2008. I don't know. It was a slow build, because, like I said, I wrote that article, interviewed 3 of the veterans, and from there they started writing the legislation, decided to create the monument. And so that would have been like 2018, 17, 18. And then that interview I did with Lena became the movie. Now, Charity Adams did write a memoir that came out decades ago. Her papers are at the Library of Congress. I've gone through them, but I think it might be America trying to make amends, because an important part of this story is, when I first found out about the 6888 in 2008, and Mary Ragland was the woman I interviewed first. She actually lived in the Washington, D.C. area, so I drove up to her place, and she lived in just an impoverished area in a high-rise, apartment building, and went up into her apartment, and we sat down, and she's telling me the story, and I'm taking copious notes because we didn't have iPhones back then. And she went into her closet, and she comes out, and she's got a stack of papers. And I start going through it. It's all like general orders and manifests and troop listings. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Why do you have this? And she said, well, I was the clerk. And so I typed up all the orders, and I made copies for myself. And I'm like, this is incredible. And I didn't realize this existed. So I drove over to the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, where I do a lot of research. And I said, guys, I want to see all the records on the 6888. And they said, we don't have a single thing. And this is something I've encountered when researching Black units from World War II, that their records mysteriously, air quotes, disappear. And in my jaded experience, I almost feel like there were white guys throwing the records off the sides of the ships as they came back, because if there's no record of these guys, there's a chance they don't get VA pension benefits and things like that. And it's a very disgraceful thing I've noticed with photographs of Black units. With all the white units, there's these big binders of photos. With the Black units, it's like 4 photos. It is such a discrepancy. And I ended up going back to Mary and saying, Mary, you are the archive of the 6888. And so when all this buzz started about the monument and everything, I called her immediately, because I'm like, oh, got to get Mary in on this. And she's got the records. And the phone said the phone line was no longer operative, and came to find out she had passed away. She is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Incredible loss. She was a wonderful woman. And those records are lost too.
Oh my God, that's just
tragic.
It's so tragic how not just how they were treated back then, but the suppressing of the information and all that stuff. But it's really amazing to see how far we've come, and what these women have done for the war efforts. I mean, all of those people that were able to connect with their family. What do you think they've done? What do you think happened for civil rights in terms of war efforts, or in general, after they were able to participate?
Well, you can no longer say that Black women can't do these things, and in a way, they changed the face of the Army. When people think of the U.S. Army in the 1940s, they think of white men. And no, there's photographs of these Black women that serve their country just as proudly as anyone. A lot of them, and it really depended where they are, because some of them were able to take advantage of the GI Bill, because the GI Bill, the funding was decided by state. And so if you were in New York or Pennsylvania, these women could come home and get those benefits. If you were from certain parts of the South, they made into their state laws that Blacks could not take advantage of VA rights. And so the Black men and women coming back from World War II could not get a college education, could not enjoy those benefits. But Lena was in California and was able to take classes. She did fabrics. One of the other ladies, I remember she returned to New York. So, and everyone to a person said, we just got on with their lives, which is what you hear from a lot of World War II veterans. I know they did have some reunions, but a lot of them just forgot about their service. That was a blip on the radar screen that they did when they were young. But what I think people can feel really good about is I've talked to a number of Black officers and enlisted people in the U.S. military that said, I've heard about these women and they inspired me to join. They inspired me to be a better soldier. So you definitely have that rock in a pond ripple effect. Like, yes, a lot of people didn't know about this, but some people did, and it had a profound effect. I can tell you that I remember in the Pentagon has a lot of historical displays all through the hallways. It makes it just an amazing building. I was a historian for the Air Force Chaplain Corps for a few years, and there was a section dedicated to women in the military, and there's the picture of Charity Adams reviewing the troops, and it's like, there were Black women over in Europe. Like, didn't mention the unit, didn't say who Charity Adams was. And so with my writings and a lot of this work, people have come to me and they said, I've seen those photographs of the 688 all my life in the military. I never knew who they were, what they did, so it's amazing. Even the elements that did rise to the surface, there was no context. And thank God we're giving them context now. And if the project had to fall into anyone's hands, Tyler Perry could not have been a better person for it to move it forward.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that, and I'm really excited for the film to come out. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us that inside look at not only the movie but the women and uncovering the story. I think it's just a great thing to finally see it come to light. And I know you have a book coming out, so if you want to give us a recently released book, if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
I don't want to plug my books and no. So I have been on a 20-year quest to get the most accurate history of General George S. Patton into print. I've interviewed a lot of veterans, done a lot of research around the country and the globe, and the result is, so far, 2 volumes. The books are called Patton's War, Volume 1, Volume 2, and it's an analysis of his combat leadership, but it's very colorful because, like I said, I've interviewed a lot of soldiers and got their experiences with the general, and I'm working on Volume 3 right now. So I'm very proud of this project, but I have to admit that Patton is the antithesis of the 6888.
I was just going to say, yeah, he's pretty much the opposite.
Yeah, I always tell people, study Patton for strategy and tactics. Do not study him for racial harmony and tolerance. So, it would not have been possible without these 2 women producers, Carlota Espinoza and Carrie Selig. They were the ones that took my article, shopped it around, got it to the right people, and sort of helped nurse it along, and got it to Tyler Perry. So without Carlota and Carrie, none of this would have been possible.
Well, thank you so much again, Kevin. And and hopefully people will come out, see them, or go on Netflix, watch the movie, and grab your book. Well, thank you everyone for listening again. And we really want to take the time out to show our appreciation and respect for the women of 688 Battalion. We thank them for their service and everyone else in the military that may be marginalized after serving the country. We really don't take these stories lightly. I do understand that it is 2 white people who are discussing this story, but it's not a light subject to us, and we think it's very, very important, and we just feel that these stories need to be told. And I will end today with a fun fact of the day. It is International Day for Women in Maritime, and it's also my birthday. So keep an eye out for some content that we have related to women in maritime history. We already have some stuff from a couple months ago that we are going to reshare on FreightWaves Classic, but we're going to look at some new stuff too. But thank you everyone for tuning in, And you can follow me on Twitter at JakelBrielle to see what else we have going on at FreightWaves Classic. And you can email me at you can email me at bjakel@freightwaves.com. Tune in 2 weeks for our next episode on June 1st on FreightWaves TV, or listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts.